All you want to do is sit in a cafe and quietly enjoy this podcast. When...
Hi, can I have a tall, hemi-demi-semi, half-calf goat milk latte? Oh, and can you serve it in a macchiato glass?
Oh, give me strength. Cut the nonsense and keep it real with Trebor.
Pick up a refreshing boost of Trebor Extra Strong Mints or a chewy treat of Trebor Soft Mints.
Onto your headphones and pour your favorite beverage. It's time for the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, fresh off the sidelines, your host, Matt McPeak.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? Welcome to the Week 17 edition of the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Special little episode we're going to do here. We're going to just look at prop bets because anybody that plays fantasy football in Week 17 is absolutely insane. It's been a little frustrating, though. Sorry for getting this episode out to you guys late, but I've been waiting for FanDuel Sportsbook and the DraftKings Sportsbook to get these props out for me to, do some analysis on, and they've been taking their sweet ass time, probably because there's as many question marks about this game as there's been all year round. So a lot of these games, the props, the ones that I really want to look at aren't available yet, and I'm recording 10:30 on Saturday, January 2nd here. So again, sorry for getting this out to you guys late, but again, it's just going to be props here, and then we'll get into the Week 17 podcast picks as well. But let's jump into this first game. So we got the Falcons at the Bucs. They played 2 weeks ago. Buccaneers won 31-27. Ronald Jones did not play in that game. Leonard Fournette saw 14 carries and 3 catches on 5 targets, only 65 total yards, but he did score twice. The Falcons' run D has allowed the second fewest rushing yards and touchdowns to running backs this year. It looks like Ronald Jones is going to play in this game, so I'm expecting a split between these two backs. I don't think that Ronald Jones is going to come back from his COVID issues and the finger surgery, and they're just going to give him 20 carries, So I'm going to stay away from any Buccaneer running back prop. The only rushing defense that has been better than the Falcons this year as far as rushing yards go is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're the only defense to have allowed under 1,000 rushing yards to running backs, almost 200 yards less than the Falcons too. So they've been absolutely incredible as far as stopping the run. The Falcons running backs only ran the ball 12 times in Week 15 against Tampa. Gurley had -1 yards on his only carry. Brian Hill had -2 yards on his 5 carries, and then Ito Smith had a respectable 24 yards on his 6 carries. If there is anything I like as far as running backs go in this game, maybe an under rushing yards for Brian Hill or Todd Gurley. Again, neither of their rushing prop is available on FanDuel or DraftKings. Right now, Ito Smith's under 33.5 rushing yards on FanDuel is somewhat appealing. It's -112 right now. He's the one of the 3 guys that is the most explosive, so I'm not crazy about taking his under because, he could bust off a 20-25 yard run, but right now he's the only one available. So if you want to ride this Buccaneers run defense, he's the only one you can ride with as far as an under goes. Julio missed last week, so I took Calvin Ridley's over 5.5 receptions, but missed it because he only caught 5 of his 9 targets. When these two teams played in Week 15, Ridley saw 14 targets and caught 10. So I'm interested if I can get another 5.5 this week, because if I do, I will probably be taking the over on Ridley's receptions, but again, that's not available. You're going to hear me say that a lot. A lot of props that I'm interested in are just simply not available as of right now. Mike Evans is coming off back-to-back games with over 100 receiving yards. He's really the only Buccaneers wide receiver that's consistently getting targets, averaging over 8.5 targets a game. As good as Atlanta's run D is, their pass D is equally as bad. Fourth most receptions, third most receiving yards allowed to running backs. So the only prop I'd be looking at is Evans' receptions or receiving yards, I guess. And if I had to pick one Buccaneers wide receiver to score, it would be Mike Evans. So, he leads the team in red zone targets with 17 as of right now. Gronkowski is second on the team in red zone targets with 13. The Falcons are tied with the Jets for the most receptions allowed to tight ends. They've also allowed the third most receiving yards to tight ends, 10 touchdowns allowed to the position. Gronk had one of his crappier games against Atlanta in Week 15, but he had a big game last week with 2 touchdowns. Gronk most likely will make the tight end touchdown round robin parlay this week. Gronk's anytime touchdown prop for FanDuel is plus 230 right now, and I think on DraftKings it was like plus 160 or something. So definitely a lot more advantageous for you if you're going to take a Gronk touchdown prop to take it on FanDuel. Hayden Hurst has 4 or 5 catches in each of the last 2 games with a touchdown in each. Again, no Julio in those games. The Bucs have allowed 5.5 receptions per game to tight ends. So if I'm looking at a Hayden Hurst prop, it's going to be receptions and not yardage. Maybe a touchdown. We saw him score last week on a nice fake pitch shovel pass from the 5-yard line. Looked very Chief-esque. So that should give you some confidence if you want to be the Hurst touchdown prop guy. For them to draw up a play for him in the red zone is definitely a good thing. He's third on the team in red zone targets. Sorry, guys, I'm not feeling all that great today. Hopefully I don't have the COVID-19 coronavirus. Ravens at Bengals. The Bengals have allowed the 4th most rushing yards to running backs this year, but they actually did a pretty good job against the Ravens in Week 5. 116 yards combined on 19 carries between Ingram, Edwards, and Dobbins. And more impressively, only 3 rushing yards allowed to Lamar Jackson, his lowest rushing yard game by far of the year. But you look at Cincinnati's last game, gave up 4 yards per carry to Zeke, and over 4 yards per carry to Myles Gaskins and Benny Snell. J.K. Dobbins now has 5 straight games with between 11 and 15 carries, 7 in his last 8. He's averaged 67 yards a game in his last 5 games. His yards per carry is at 5.3 this year. So I'm hoping for a yardage prop between 60 and 70 for him. If I'm not going to take the over, it's set any higher than 72, I might pass. But if it's anything lower than 70, set right around 70, I'll probably be looking at that over. I might be interested in a Gus Edwards rushing prop, though. Might be more interested in that one. It's going to be smaller than Dobbins, and Edwards had 8 of his 15 carries last week in the second half while the Ravens were up big. Dobbins only had 3 carries in the third quarter and none in the fourth quarter, so it was clear that they just pretty much just took him off the field. So if the Ravens get up big in this game, Edwards will most likely be the guy getting those garbage time carries. So I'll be looking for Edwards' rushing prop. As of right now, it is still not available, which is very frustrating. But that's the way it is. Cowboys at Giants. The one prop I've looked at this year as far as the Cowboys go is the under on the receiving yards for the opposing running back. They've allowed the second fewest receiving yards to running backs this year. I don't know which one to go with, Gallman or Freeman. And, of course, neither of them are available right now. Evan Ingram had only 1 catch for 16 yards in their first game. The Cowboys have allowed the third fewest receiving yards to tight ends. So I might be looking at Ingram's under. The Cowboys' offense is so unpredictable. Don't know which wide receiver is going to have the good game, which one's going to have the bad game. What are the splits going to be as far as Zeke and Tony Pollard go? But the Giants have allowed the third most receiving yards to running backs. So maybe look at Ezekiel Elliott's over in receiving yards. He had 4 of the 6 RB targets last week in the game that, it made sense for them to split the touches, and he saw the majority of those RB targets. So if I'm going to take a receiving yard prop for either of the Cowboys running backs, it's going to be Zeke. Dolphins at Bills. The Bills have struggled against slot receivers and tight ends this year. I'd like to put Kickin on the tight end touchdown ticket, but they use all three of their tight ends down there in Miami, especially in the red zone. Both teams like to use their tight ends, actually. And the Miami offense is just so different depending on who's at quarterback. Fitzpatrick won't be playing because of COVID, so it looks like it's going to be Tua. I'd be looking at Gesicki's over receiving yards. The Bills' 6th most receptions and 4th most receiving yards to tight ends. If it's set at something low enough, they like to use him deep. He's definitely has the highest ADOT as far as the 3 tight ends go. So I would probably be looking at a receiving yard and not a reception prop for Gesicki. Vikings at Lions. With the news that Dalvin Cook will not play in Week 17, Alexander Mattison should see a good 20 carries, at least 20 touches, you'd figure. The Vikings ran for 275 yards against the Lions in Week 9, and the Lions have allowed the 5th most rushing yards this year and a ridiculous 26 touchdowns to running backs. So Madison's over on rushing yards, attempts, touchdown, whatever. He's somebody that I'm going to be very much looking for, especially in DFS this week. Jets at Patriots. The only props I'd be interested in are Jamison Crowder's receptions. But the Pats are 5th in fewest receptions allowed to running backs. The Patriots have the 10th highest average explosive pass rate, but Rashad Perriman, he had 100 yards in the Week 9 game against the Patriots, but he had 0 catches on 6 targets last week. Not exactly a confidence booster. He's got the most air yards on the team, is definitely their best deep threat, but he's just so incredibly inconsistent. I'll probably end up staying away from this game entirely. Maybe take a look at Ty Johnson's rushing prop. No Frank Gore, no LaMichael P. Ryan. Ty Johnson's going to be their guy. It's still not available as of right now, but maybe come Sunday morning, it will be. Steelers at Browns. We already know that Big Ben will not play in this game, so that pretty much kills all the Steelers wide receivers. I can't imagine James Conner plays, and I would bet that Benny Snell doesn't really see all that much work either. I think the only Steeler prop I'd be looking at is Anthony McFarland, the rookie running back. You got to figure that going into the playoffs, they're going to want to conserve James Conner and Benny Snell just because James Conner hasn't been able to show that he can be relied on. The Browns obviously need this game, so they're going to be all systems go. With whoever suits up. Kareem Hunt has at least 3 catches in each of the last 4 games, but the Steelers have allowed the fewest receptions and receiving yards to running backs. So I wouldn't be all that excited about the Browns running backs. Although, if they end up sitting half the defense, then those guys should be just fine. Jarvis Landry had hit over his reception prop in 4 straight games before missing last week. If he is active and I can get it at 4.5 again, I will probably be looking at that. I think the props I'm most interested in, though, for this game is Austin Hooper. He had 15 targets last week with 4 of the Browns wide receivers out. Who knows who's going to actually be playing in this game? Plus, Harrison Bryant is out as well, so that alone should boost Hooper's involvement. The Steelers have been tough on tight ends, but again, if everybody's going to be sitting, I think that's an easy prop to look at. Titans at Texans. The Texans have allowed the most scrimmage yards and the 3rd most touchdowns to running backs. So you can't go wrong with a Derrick Henry rushing yard prop or anytime touchdown prop. David Johnson has had 2 great games in a row now, but I'm not putting any money on a David Johnson prop. I'm sorry. Corey Davis missed the Week 6 game against Houston, but Tannehill had a great game, so I want to see what his receiving yard prop is set at. Of course, it's still not available. Cardinals at Rams. No Jared Goff, probably no Cooper Kupp. Maybe no Kyler Murray. He says he's going to play, but who knows? I don't even know who's playing quarterback for the Rams. It's some guy, I don't remember his name. But I guess with no Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods and Josh Reynolds or maybe Van Jefferson reception prop are interesting. I wouldn't go crazy looking at receiving yards because who the hell knows what's going to happen with this offense. If Akers doesn't play. Or, I'm sorry, we don't know if Cam Akers is going to play yet, but I think Darrell Henderson is also going to be out. So if Akers plays, I'll look at his rushing yard prop. He had 94 total yards in Week 13, 72 of them on the ground. The Rams have allowed the fewest receiving yards and touchdowns to wide receivers this year. So even if Kyler Murray plays, I'll probably stay away from any Cardinal wide receiver prop unless they set Hopkins' receiving yard prop, any higher. Sorry, I'm looking at it right now. So DeAndre Hopkins, 75.5 on DraftKings and 73.5 on FanDuel. So, yeah, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins under 75.5 receiving yards up against Jalen Ramsey for the Rams. Yeah, I might take a look at that. It's minus 112. Not a bad price tag. Interesting. Packers at Bears. So Devontae Adams is always a good bet for an anytime touchdown. He's only had 3 games this year without a touchdown. The Bears are 5th in fantasy points allowed, tied for the 3rd most touchdowns allowed to tight ends. Tanyan had his first game since Week 10 without a touchdown last week. He had his 2nd best game against the Bears in Week 12. So Robert Tanyan might make the tight end touchdown ticket right now. His touchdown prop is set at plus 155, so that's nice. The Bears are an average defense in rushing yards allowed, but they are tied for the fewest touchdowns allowed to running backs. For the Packers RBs, it's all going to come down to whether Jamal Williams plays or not. Last time I saw, he's healthy. He practiced on Friday, so he should be playing. I have A.J. Dillon in both of my Dynasty leagues, so I was thrilled to see what he did last week, put up over 120 rushing yards. If Williams is out again and Dillon is, if his number is low, I might consider it. The Packers' run D has been terrible all year. They did an all right job against Derrick Henry last week, holding him to just 98 yards. David Montgomery has been a monster over the last 5 games, over 100 total yards in each of his last 5 games, 7 touchdowns in those 5 games. I will definitely be looking at David Montgomery's numbers. Allen Robinson caught 8 passes, 2 for touchdowns against the Packers in Week 12, despite the Packers allowing the 4th fewest receptions and the 5th fewest touchdowns to wide receiver. He has such a stranglehold on the Bears' target share. I can't see him, I can't see playing an under for Allen Robinson, and I'm pulling it up right now. 5.5 receptions is his prop for DraftKings. Minus 155, pretty damn expensive, but yeah, I mean, 5.5. He's probably only had a handful of games under 6 receptions this year, so that might be one to look at. Jaguars at Colts. This is a game that I actually already have a same game parlay. When I was going through these last night, this was one game that actually had a whole bunch of props that I was interested in available. So it's the one cool thing about FanDuel is they offer you these same game parlays. Of course, they don't have receptions as one of these same game options, which is very frustrating. But they got to cook it somehow to keep the advantage for them. But yeah, so the Colts D is really good. I don't trust Matt Glennon, so I can't confidently take any wide receiver props, take any overs. If anything, I do like Keelan Cole's under 39.5 receiving yards. He has been the guy, the least consistent guy over the past few weeks with Matt Glennon at quarterback. James Robinson will not play in this game, and I don't know what the hell the Jags are going to do at running back right now. Adare Ogunbowale is projected to be the most productive running back, at least through all the fantasy sites. But Adare Ogunbowale under 58.5 rushing yards to me is the one to go with. This dude was cut by Tampa Bay. He was brought on as, just I guess you could call him a veteran, but I don't see him putting up 60 rushing yards against the Colts D. I think the Jaguars are gonna fall behind. I think with the number 2 spot already locked up, they're gonna want to put up points. They're gonna throw the ball. So I think Adare Ogunbowale under 58.5 rushing yards is a pretty safe bet, and it's only minus 112 right now. Same thing with Keelan Cole's under 39.5. Jonathan Taylor should have a monster game. The Jags are tied for the 5th most touchdowns and the 3rd most rushing yards allowed to running backs. Taylor has 6 touchdowns in his last 4 games. So, yeah, Jonathan Taylor over 78.5 rushing yards. That is also minus 112 right now. Zach Pascal has had 2 really good games, 3 touchdowns and 143 yards over those 2 games. I wanted to take a look at his yardage prop, but it was not available last night when I was putting together this same game parlay, so I stayed away. I also took on that parlay, because why not add an extra leg or two? I took Jonathan Taylor to score. I took the Colts. I bought their alternate spread down to minus 9.5, so they only need to win by 10 and not by whatever it is, 14.5. I think it's up to right now. And then I also took the Colts money line for the first half. The Colts, I think it was 18.5 they average as far as points in the first half, and the Jags average only like 8 points in the first half. So pretty lopsided there. So I think that's a pretty safe one as well. So I think I paid like right around $20 for a $250 cash out for that same game parlay. I've hit on a couple of these same games this year, but they're pretty fun. Raiders at Broncos. Might take a look at Josh Jacobs under receiving yards. The Broncos have allowed the 6th lowest yards per reception to running backs this year. Jacobs has only had 5 games this year with over 20 receiving yards, including the Week 10 game against the Broncos when he had 24 on 4 catches. No catches on just 2 targets last week. So if it's set at 25, 26, I might take an under there. Denver held Waller to his season low in receptions in Week 10, and they've only allowed 4 touchdowns to tight ends this year. So I will be avoiding any Darren Waller props this week. The prop I'm most looking at here is Melvin Gordon's rushing yards. It is currently set at 73.5 on FanDuel, and I believe it was 75.5 on DraftKings. The Raiders' run D has been terrible all year. 3rd most rushing yards allowed. Third most rushing touchdowns allowed to RBs, the 8th most rushing yards allowed over the last 3 games. Gordon cleared his over last week by 8 yards, playing his former team with Phillip Lindsay on IR now. I think it's a pretty safe bet, man. Chargers at Chiefs, no Patrick Mahomes. Who the hell knows what other players are going to end up sitting in this game? Too many uncertainties for me to be looking at any Chiefs props. We saw my boy XFL standout Donald Parham caught 2 deep balls last week, one for 21 yards, one for 26 yards. The Chiefs are in the top 10 in explosive plays allowed to tight ends. So I will be looking at Donald Parham's longest reception. Maybe yards, maybe even touchdown prop as well, especially if Hunter Henry is still not back from his COVID stint. The Chiefs have allowed the most receiving yards to running backs this year, so Austin Eckler's yardage prop is definitely interesting as far as receiving yards go. It is still not available as of right now, of course. Saints and Panthers, if there's no Christian McCaffrey, I'm avoiding all Panthers RB props. The Saints have allowed the 7th fewest rushing yards, the 5th fewest receptions, and the 3rd fewest receiving yards to running backs. So they just shut down running backs. If I were to take a Panther wide receiver prop, it would be a touchdown prop because all 3 of these guys are pretty inconsistent. I guess Curtis Samuel's reception prop, if I can get it at 4.5, wouldn't be the worst bet. He's had at least 5 catches in the last over the last 7 in 5 of the last 7 games. Sorry about that. Alvin Kamara set the single game record for the most rushing touchdowns last week with 6. The Panthers have allowed the 2nd most receptions to RBs this year, so maybe Kamara reception prop is something I'd be interested in looking at. Of course, it's still not available. Seahawks at 49ers. George Kittle had 92 yards last week in his return against the Cardinals, who have allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. So it's actually not a very good matchup for tight ends against the Cardinals, and he came back and looked great. The Seahawks D ain't bad against tight ends, but they're not great either. Brandon Ayuk is out for this game. Deebo Samuels is still on IR, so I think Kittle will have to catch a bunch of balls in this game in order for them to have a chance to win. So looking at his reception prop might be interesting. Maybe take a peek at Richie James's yardage. He had that huge 184-yard game in Week 9 when the 49ers wide receiver core was completely crippled by COVID-19. Right now on FanDuel, they have it set at 34.5 receiving yards, which I think is insane. Minus 112. I jumped on that already. Maybe Kendrick Bourne receptions if it's not too high, because I don't know who else they're going to throw the ball to besides these three guys. So if you can get that at 2.5, 3.5, maybe that's worth a play as well. The Seahawks have allowed the most receptions and receiving yards to wide receivers this year, so I think you can't go wrong with receiving prop for either Richie James or Kendrick Bourne. Raheem Mostert is also on IR, so Jeff Wilson should be the lead dog, but the Seahawks have been pretty good against running backs, especially in the second half of the season, so I'll probably stay away from 49er RB props. DK Metcalf had 12 catches on 15 targets for 161 yards and 2 touchdowns last time they played in Week 8. Chris Carson didn't play in that game, but they still ran the ball 30 times, so I don't think that was the result of Carson not playing, DK having such a crazy game. With how inconsistent Tyler Lockett has been, I think DK is the only guy that you can back as far as a receiving prop. Right now, he's at 64.5 receiving yards. That's on FanDuel, minus 112 right now. And last but not least, we got the Washington football team at the Philadelphia Eagles. Last week, I wanted to go with the under for Miles Sanders receiving yards because of how good the Cowboys have been against running backs in the passing game this season. But his number was set at 18.5, which was too low for me to take an under. He finished with like 26 or 27 yards. This week, he gets Washington, who's allowed the third fewest receptions and the fourth fewest receiving yards. So Sanders has had 3 straight games with between 21 and 27 receiving yards after 5 straight games with under 20. So I think the QB change has really opened that part of the offense for the Eagles. Seems like it's something that Hurts is a little better at than Wentz, getting the ball to his running back with some space to run. So I will definitely be interested in seeing what his number is set at come Sunday morning. And that's going to do it for the prop bet section of Week 17 here. Let's take a hot minute. We'll drop in the prop bet, or the podcast picks for Week 17. All right, Week 17. So I went 5-4 last week. Unfortunately, it looks like I'm going to fall short of my 60% goal for the year. Even with 9 perfect picks this week, I think I'll only end up getting up to like 58, 59%. So let's shoot for that, I guess. It hasn't been easy this year, forcing myself to go with 3 touchdown props and, forcing an over and an under. But it's been a lot of fun. So let's check out the Week 17 picks. I got the Titans minus 7.5. The Titans win the AFC South with a win over the Texans here. Derrick Henry had 260 total yards and a pair of touchdowns in their first matchup. The Texans D mailed it in weeks ago. I think we see Houston defenders making a whole bunch of business decisions here. Derrick Henry, I think, goes wild, and I think the Titans win by a good 10 points in this game. Washington minus 3 at the Eagles. They also need to win in order to clinch the division. So if they beat the Eagles Sunday night, it's the NFC East is theirs. This one's still a little sketchy because we still don't have confirmation that Alex Smith is 100% going to start, but most likely he's going to be at the helm for them. This bet is more so on the defense than the offense, though. Really, I think this Washington defense is really going to be something to watch out for over the next few years. The third pick is going to be the Ravens minus 13. They have a win. And you're a win and you're in situation here. They've been putting up points over the last few games, 148 points in the last 4 weeks. I don't see the Bengals offense having anywhere near the success in this game as they did last week against the Texans. I think the Ravens are rolling, and I think they get themselves their third straight 14-point victory here against the division rival Cincinnati Bengals. My over for Week 17 is going to be Saints-Panthers over 47.5. The total was 51 back in Week 9 when these two teams met. I think both offenses are in pretty much the same positions as they were back in Week 9, if not in any better situations. My only concern is the weather, and as of right now, they're calling for 57 degrees and no rain. So I like this NFC South game to go over 47.5. We usually see a lot of high-scoring games in the NFC South. My under is going to be the Cardinals at the Rams, under 40.5. The Rams will be playing their backup QB in this game. I just looked it up. It's John Walford. Kyler Murray is also banged up, will not play in this game. The Rams defense has been pretty damn good this year, and the Cardinals surprisingly haven't been all that bad either. So I think this is going to be a very run-heavy defensive type of game. I think the Rams struggle to put up points with their backup quarterback, with no Cooper Kupp, with no Darrell Henderson, possibly no Cam Akers. So give me the under for the Cardinals-Rams game. My touchdown scorers this week. I'm going with the chalk again. Derrick Henry should have a field day against the Texans like he did in the first game. He's got a high price tag like usual, but I can't say no. Jonathan Taylor, the future top dog of the AFC South running backs, should also have a big day. Been on fire lately. I think this is exactly what the Colts wanted to see from this kid all along, and he's going to get fed the ball because they need to win in order to have a shot. And my third TD scorer is going to be Alexander Mattison. With no Dalvin Cook and the best matchup for running backs, Madison has he's got to be one of the guys here. I think the end of the season couldn't come earlier enough for either of these teams, but especially the Lions. Madison will be jacked up to show that he can be a top dog if he's given the opportunity. So give me the Vikings backup running back to score. And last but not least, we got our final road dog of the week. Road dog for Week 17.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody.
All right, I've been wrong. Seems like every single time when I go either for or against the Dolphins, but I'm taking them this week, +3 at the Bills. I would actually be more confident in this pick if it was Fitzmagic at quarterback, but it is going to be Tua here in Week 17. I still think this game is going to be a field goal kind of game. Yes, the Bills' offense is very much explosive, but I don't know. The Dolphins' defense is really freaking good, man. I think they're going to make the adjustments that they needed to make from that first matchup. I know this game is at 1 o'clock, but I'm pretty sure the Bills, even if they win, it's going to be like they get like the second seed instead of the third seed or something like that. So I don't know if they're really going to have all that much motivation. Maybe second half comes around if they're down by 4 or 5 points, whatever it happens to be. I think they might just be like, screw it, let's get healthy, let's rest these guys, not take any more unnecessary hits. So I'm going to take the Dolphins getting 3 points. I might buy myself the hook on that so that, if they lose by a field goal, I can hook out for the win. So I might buy that up to 3.5, which probably won't cost you all that much. But as far as the podcast goes, we will be at +3. So Dolphins +3 for the road dog of the week in Week 17. I've been 11-5 for my road dogs this year. Hopefully I can keep that up. And finish the season strong here. So that's going to do it for the podcast. Thank you so much. I'm not sure if I'm going to do an episode next week or not. Might do one for the for the playoffs as far as props go, and maybe DFS, but we'll see. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for tuning in this year and for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. And as always, may the fantasy gods be with you.
You have been listening to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. For more great episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Kickin' or Stickin' is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. Kickin' or Stickin' is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gambling operates the National Problem Gambling Helpline Network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to play responsibly and always look for your man downfield.
MG is back, and it's electric. The MG ZS EV. From just €28,995, the truly affordable, family-friendly electric range. Go to mg.ie and recharge your soul.
All you want to do is sit in a cafe and quietly enjoy this podcast. When...
Hi, can I have a tall hemi-demi-semi half-calf goat milk latte? Oh, and can you serve it in a macchiato glass?
Oh, give me strength. Cut the nonsense and keep it real with Trebor.
Pick up a refreshing boost of Trebor Extra Strong Mints or a chewy treat of Trebor Soft Mints.